When you hear the term black gold, what do you think of? Some of you may think I'm referencing oil, but in fact to many modern farmers and home gardeners, black gold refers to compost. This is because its deep dark brown color gives it an almost black appearance, and it's packed full of nutrients that are great for your garden and plants. Due to the pandemic, food shortages have never been more widespread or commonplace, and food prices have never been higher. This is what inspired me and my wife to start improving our gardening practices and looking for a better method. This is when we started discovering compost and implementing it in our garden. According to the Green Action Center, 40% of all residential trash is organic and compostable. And when it's left in the trash to break down in landfills instead of composted, it ends up producing harmful greenhouse gases such as methane, which harm our environment. When done at home, you get a free, organic, non-chemical fertilizer that does no harm to the environment as it does not produce the gases such as methane. Composting can occur in a few different ways and has some great effects for the environment. There are some easy do's and don'ts when you're composting and a few disadvantages that go along with it. Let's first take a look into what happens to make composting possible. We have a few different methods of composting. The first one being cold composting or anaerobic, which means it does not need oxygen to work. It is considered the easiest way to compost, as you simply need to leave a pile of leaves, organic material, and other such things that you normally compost in a pile in your yard. This method does have the disadvantage of taking 6 months to a year to make usable compost. Next, we have hot composting or aerobic composting. Aerobic means that it does need oxygen to work, unlike the cold composting, and if it does not have the oxygen, it will not work. Hot composting consists of essentially piling your organic and compostable materials and then stirring them and aerating them several times a week and allowing them to break down faster than if you not stirred them and you did the cold composting method. This results in faster production of soil and ends up resulting in usable compost in a month to 3 months. Finally, we have the method that me and my wife like to use, which is vermicompost, in which you take the same steps as you would with hot composting and add worms and other beneficial creatures to the compost pile. This helps break down organic materials even faster as worms eat the scraps and produce nitrogen-rich worm casings. According to Sheila Hu, senior editor at NRDC, compost contains 3 primary nutrients needed by garden crops: nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, as you can see in my picture in my slide. It also requires a few other secondary elements such as calcium, magnesium, iron, and zinc. And instead of relying on synthetic fertilizers that contain harmful chemicals, composting offers an organic alternative. Research has shown the capability of compost to increase soil's water retention capacity, productivity, and resiliency, showing just how much great work compost can do for your garden. Now let's get further in depth on what exactly goes into making compost. So to start with, let's keep it simple. What can't be added? Anything non-organic, as it won't break down. But some less obvious don't adds are things like meat, dairy, bones, and oils and butters. Things we can add are organic or paper materials, especially things like plants, coffee grounds, eggshells, tea bags, and cardboard boxes. On our do list, we're further split into 2 categories, browns and greens. Brown items are ones that are high in carbon, such as dry paper, dry leaves, cardboard, eggshells, and similar items. Green items are those rich in nitrogen, such as food and vegetable and fruit scraps, coffee grounds, tea leaves, and yard clippings. You have a couple different containment methods for your compost. One of them is just simply making a pile of compost in your yard. You just pick a corner or an area of your yard, pile up your organic and compostable material, and over time it'll break down into compost. You can also use above ground bins like these ones, and they have ones that me and my wife use that you actually dig into the ground with just the top exposed for airflow. And those are just some of the different methods you have of having like a compost bin area in your property. This leads into my next point, some of the disadvantages of composting. For some gardeners who pride themselves in how their yard and garden looks nice and neat, having a giant pile or bin of rotting organic material can be a bit of an eyesore around the garden. And some of the other things you got to keep in mind when starting composting is there is a bit of an initial investment in getting a compost pile started. Though as botanist Idris Yao states, they may not be that expensive, and honestly with what you're going to save in the long run on not having to buy soil and fertilizers, it's worth the cost. And the number one disadvantage of composting can be odor that it produces, and the fact that it can also often attract vermin, such as mice, rats, snake, and other such things. This can be easily avoided, though, by simply not adding meat or dairy products to your composting. This reduces the smell, as it's mostly those things producing a gas that produces that odor, and also doesn't attract rodents to come feast on your composting pile. It's been amazing getting to share some of my knowledge today on composting and its many benefits. Today, you've all taken a step forward in your knowledge of composting and maybe even a little bit about gardening, as we've covered how compost is made, what it consists of, and its benefits and its few disadvantages. I thank you all for joining me today, and I hope I've inspired a few of you out there to start your own compost piles and improve your gardening and plant health today, all while reducing waste.